Today, we will be introducing Observe by Snowflake, a platform that's redefining observability at scale. We'll be talking from a few of the leaders of Observe here, and we also will be introducing several new features. Features that help AI agents get new capabilities and new access to data they need, as well as helping customers control their data and where it's stored. So after the webinar, we will have a Q&A, and so stick around, hit the button at the bottom of your screen if you do have a question, the Q&A button, and ask your questions. We'll tackle some of them at the end live with our speakers. Now I'd like to welcome Jeremy Burton, the former CEO of Observe and now the GM of Observability at Snowflake. Jeremy, Observe was recently acquired by Snowflake about 3 months ago. Can you tell us a little bit about Observe, both the organization, the team that joined Snowflake, as well as Observe, the platform? Give us a little background here.
Yeah, well, it's great to be back doing real work. We had a little bit of a hiatus as we were moved into Snowflake. But yeah, let me spend a few minutes just maybe for those that are not familiar with Observe. I suspect we'll have quite a few new folks on the line today. I'll maybe cover a little bit of old ground, and then I can bring everyone right up to date with sort of the rationale for the acquisition and really where we're focused. For those of you that don't know Observe, first of all, we were founded about 7 years ago. We were based right down the road from Snowflake in San Mateo, California. And in fact, our founding team, not only did they have a lot of experience in working with massive data volumes, we actually were fortunate enough to have a couple of very early Snowflake engineers that had worked on the Snowflake query engine and the unstructured data support. We made the strategic decision to just build for Snowflake from day one. For me personally, that was a natural thing to do. I've been fortunate enough to be on the board of Snowflake since pre-revenue, and really believed that it was going to have a fairly dramatic impact on the way that people would store and manage data. So for me, that was kind of an obvious and easy decision to make. Over the last 7 years, we've built a great business. We have great gross retention. We have great net revenue retention. We are probably the biggest Snowflake application, bar none. Hundreds of millions of queries a day, petabytes of data. And that ultimately led to us being acquired by Snowflake a little bit early this year in February. The space that we're in, observability, I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It often, though, gets confused with a term that is very close to where Snowflake plays, data observability. There are tools which look inside data pipelines, look at data quality. We don't do that. We focus on troubleshooting distributed applications, agentic AI applications. So we focus on going to software engineers, SREs, DevOps teams, and we help them get visibility and really find out why the application is broken or why the customer had an issue with a particular part of the application or particular function that they were performing. We've tended to focus over the years on companies that are running at scale. I think John mentioned this earlier. Our real differentiator is folks who've got large engineering teams, hundreds or thousands of engineers, and tens, hundreds, or even of terabytes, but even petabytes of data. That's really where we focused. It's where the product is differentiated, and really where the business and the infrastructure and the application has a lot of complexity. What are we selling? What's the value proposition? It's actually very, very simple. The average time to resolve an incident in the industry is about 2.5 hours. That is a big problem. It should not be that long. If you have a customer-facing application, maybe it's a mobile banking application, or maybe it's some kind of e-commerce application, obviously that's going to impact customer experience. It could well impact revenue. It could well impact the brand. We're trying to drive down the time to resolve incidents by an order of magnitude. How do we make it 10x faster to do that? Secondly, if you just do a little bit of searching on the interwebs, you will realize pretty quick that the single biggest issue facing observability teams is cost. The data volumes have grown dramatically over the last several years, promised to grow dramatically with the advent of AI in future, and many budgets are at breaking point. They have to figure out a way to reduce the cost of storing the data, reduce the cost of analyzing the data, in order to make the math on the budget work. So typically we've seen Observe drive down costs by about 60% versus incumbents. And as I said, if you combine that with a 10x improvement in MTTR, that's really the value proposition of observability tooling. Now you might be sitting there thinking, okay, well, where does that come from? What's our approach? How do we do that? We were really the first vendor to talk about sending all telemetry to a single central data lake or lakehouse architecture. We do believe that the cost issues that exist with most observability tools, it's an architectural problem. It's not that they're criminal enterprises and they just need to give you more discount. They have an architectural problem. The lakehouse solves a big chunk of that architectural problem. We also combine that sort of low-cost lakehouse architecture, cheap S3 storage, compression. We also combine that with something that is open. We believe that no longer should you have proprietary agents. That they should be open telemetry based. We've done that since day one. Secondly, we believe that all storage of data should be in an Apache Iceberg format. Again, recent occurrence, certainly more recent than open telemetry, but we think the lakehouse architecture is going to be predicated on an Apache Iceberg storage format. The nice thing, probably for the first time, many organizations are not going to feel locked in because they're not sending their data to a vendor who holds it in a proprietary format, actually holds it hostage in many cases. So that's the sort of foundation, the lakehouse. We have a little bit of magic on top of that. And again, we've been building this for quite some time. We originally called it a knowledge graph. And we did a lot of work, a lot of transformation on that sort of raw telemetry that came into the lakehouse. And we would create a semantic layer so that it was much easier for folks who are troubleshooting to find the entities that they cared about. Don't look at like raw telemetry and search for IDs. Look for your shopping carts, or look up for your customer accounts, or go look at the things that are interesting to your business. And from there, drill down into the telemetry and the technical signals if need be. Well, it turns out that the knowledge graph was actually super useful for humans to troubleshoot. And in its current incarnation, we now call it a context graph. It turns out that it's actually very, very useful, or even more useful, I would argue, for AI agents. If you don't provide agents with the right context, then often what happens is they're going to query, the hundreds of terabytes of telemetry, and you're just going to blow the context window and everything is going to grind to a halt. So the real magic of Observe is this semantic layer we call the context graph. And that really allows us to provide the context for the agent to drive the troubleshooting flow. And the final piece of the puzzle, and I've mentioned it several times already, is the AI front end. We have a highly curated sort of AI SRE front end that drives the investigation and drives to root cause. What we're also seeing, though, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, we're seeing many people programmatically drive that AI SRE via our MCP server, or as you'll see in a second, through our CLI. So very, very simple architecture, lakehouse in the foundation, a context graph that abstracts and provides semantics on top of that raw telemetry, and then really AI driving the troubleshooting flow. So the rationale then for Snowflake acquiring Observe, as you probably gleaned from my comments so far, we felt from day one that observability was a data problem. Everything is a matter of data. If you have enough data, if you can structure it, if you can relate it, if you can get it in the right shape, you can troubleshoot practically any problem. And we felt for some time that observability data was too siloed. It was too dense. Our solution to that, put it in a Snowflake database, transform it, relate it, and then your humans, your agents, everyone finds root cause faster. We think there's a huge opportunity as a part of Snowflake to better vertically integrate. We've already been part of Snowflake since day one. But we think that we can more deeply integrate and we can optimize the Snowflake platform for the Observe workload. We've always had pretty amazing economics. I think we're going to set a new bar for great economics in the world of observability over the next year or so. And by the way, that needs to happen because data volumes are only increasing. We think that together with Snowflake, not only can we drive down the cost and redefine economics, we think the work that Snowflake is doing with AI is going to lead us to be able to deliver not just sort of fast query access, but accurate query access. Think in the world of AI, context is king. And finally, we intend to keep focusing on the large enterprises. We want to solve the biggest, the most complex, the gnarliest observability problems. So the more data you have and the more complex your environment, the more interested we are. That's really where we've focused over the last few years, and certainly with Snowflake, we intend to keep on focusing there. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour of where we've been, where we've come from. Certainly for those of you that are new, hopefully that's a good primer. So John, back to you.
Yeah, Jeremy, thanks. I think that is a great foundation for the team and who we are and what we've been doing and our recent journey. I'd like to ask you a few questions about moving forward and how things have been going and since we joined Snowflake. I think actually, if you could say a few words about how we are operating inside Snowflake. We were an ongoing concern with an existing set of customers and an existing platform. How are we operating now inside Snowflake?
Yeah, so the nice thing, I guess, with Snowflake is I'm the only one who got a new boss. Snowflake essentially picked up Observe and dropped it under Sridhar, the CEO. The nice thing about that is obviously we want to keep the innovation machine going. As a startup of a couple of hundred people, we could move fast. We could focus on the use case. We want to continue to do that. So I still have a lot of autonomy over how Observe operates. Customers should see, no disruption in service. I'd also say, though, the great thing here is with Snowflake's backing, they obviously had a lot more cash than we did. The goal would be to accelerate our roadmaps using Snowflake's cash. And so keeping the entity together, having a direct line to Sridhar, focusing on our customers and focusing on our use case, that's really how we're operating going forward.
Thanks. Could you say a few words about the commercial situation? I know a lot of our Observe's old customers were Snowflake customers as well, and now Snowflake customers are interested in using Observe. How is the commercial situation working out?
Yeah, so we tended to go to different people, so that the Snowflake users and the Observe users didn't get invited to the same parties. Snowflake typically would go to the data ops folks or the data engineering folks, whereas Observe would tend to go to the DevOps or the SREs or the software engineering teams. So different buying centers, but like an existing Snowflake customer, obviously, if they've got a commitment to Snowflake, then they obviously can procure Observe using that commitment. So it should be very, very straightforward. If you've got an existing relationship with Snowflake, if you want to move forward with Observe, sort of rest assured that you can use that commitment to purchase Observe, and we'll try and make it as pain-free as absolutely possible.
That's great. And like we said, if anybody has questions, just put them down in the Q&A. We'll try to address them later. Yeah, I also wanted to kind of look forward in general, right? We're in a time of great change. The pace of changes is large. You are out there talking with CTOs, talking with engineering leadership every single day. And I'd like to know what they are saying about this rate of change and how they are managing change and how they are managing velocity as things, it's just as we see, right? 6 months ago, this conversation would have been very different. How are they approaching it today?
Yeah, I think unless you've been under a rock for the last couple of years, you will know that AI is upon all of us. It's very interesting. I get quite consistent feedback over the last like month or two. No, number one, every CEO, every senior executive is bearing down on technical teams and asking how they're going to use AI to deliver much better productivity. That's universal. I think for the last year or so, most folks have had a free pass. So the AI token spend was essentially free because folks want to drive adoption. Every indication I've gotten over the last month or so is that starting to go away. The AI spend is starting to be rationalized back with the functional budgets. And so there's going to be some pretty interesting decisions to make, I think, over the next year. Do you keep your AI spend at current levels? Can you justify the ROI? And if you want to keep your spend at certain levels and you don't have an overall budget increase, then what's going to give? Are you going to cut your team, or are you going to cut OpEx somewhere else? I think the second thing that I'm hearing consistently is there's all manner of sort of new agentic workflows that organizations are creating. Observe, we absolutely need to be a component part of that workflow. Observe, we tend to major on the investigation, analyze the data to understand what happened. But the incident management workflow is actually much broader than that, and there are many tools typically involved. So there's quite a lot of demand out there for driving Observe programmatically. We've had an MCP server for some time, but I think if you follow what's happening in the industry, I think MCP, I wouldn't say it's taken a back seat, but it seems like what is shining more brightly is sort of API access or a CLI that wraps those APIs. And it turns out that LLMs are pretty darn good at driving a CLI. So, sort of headless access to Observe is one way of framing it, but a lot of demand for that. So, yeah, I mean, I think some of that plays into our announcements today. But it is definitely a message that we're hearing loud and clear from our customers.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Jeremy. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. You'll be back hopefully you can join us back here at the end, and we can answer any questions that folks have.
I'll be back a little bit later.
All right, now I'm joined by Gabriel Trevides, who is the head of product for Observe, now the head of product for, I guess, observability at Snowflake here. Gabriel, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Hey, John. Thank you. Very nice to be here. So Jeremy spoke earlier about Observe's value prop and how that actually maps to our unique approach. So in short, the modern observability stack of Observe is actually comprised of the following three things. So first of all, we have a telemetry lakehouse foundation, which is tuned for observability data. So you can think of like open ingestion, open storage, low-cost, high-performance querying. There is the observability context graph, which actually structures logs, metrics, and traces, and can relate datasets to enable correlation across services and infra and give context to your AI agents. And then we have an agentic AI on top that can query the graph in natural language and can perform tasks to improve engineering productivity and reduce MTTR. Now, today, we're very excited to talk about two major updates on our offering. First, we're going to talk about our new agent-native CLI that gives you headless access to observability context and data. And then second, we're going to show you how Observe is running on top of data stored in Iceberg in your own S3. Now, as Jeremy said, last November, we launched AI SRE and MCP to enable customers to rapidly reduce MTTR. So we've been talking to a lot of them since then, and the feedback we're getting is twofold. On the one hand, they love using our UI, our AI SRE, our dashboarding, our monitoring, our alerting. At the same time, they tell us that more and more of their users, they're spending time in their own development environment of choice, and as such, they want to have access to observability data and context right then and there where they're actually working. So today, we're very excited to announce our new agent-native CLI that comes bundled with APIs and skills. In short, the Observe CLI enables you to access data and context stored in Observe straight from within your development environment. You can now build custom agentic workflows where your agent can pull the entire observability context when and where it needs to. And because it uses our observability context graph, it can do this in a very fast and efficient way without breaking the token bank. The Observe CLI comes bundled with a number of skills, and of course, you can also develop your own. And with this, I'm going to introduce you to Cole from our team, who's going to demo CLI, API, and skills running on top of Observe. Cole, over to you.
Hey, I'm Cole, and I'm going to be talking about Observe's new CLI. So here in Observe, you can see on the left that we have access to logs, traces, and metrics like you might expect. And now we also have our AI SRE that we launched last year. With the AI SRE, you can quickly find root cause analysis and recommendations from triaging, or you can just use Observe in a very natural language type way. Last year, we also announced our MCP, which was our first effort in bringing the observability context to external agents, like a coding CLI. So in the terminal, I have access to an Observe CLI, as you can see here. And with this, I can explore my data from Observe. I could look at potentially active firing alerts. And here we can see that I have a few critical alerts in my cart service. I could continue to investigate here, but with the skills that we're shipping with the CLI, it's perfect for a coding agent to consume and use natively. So instead of continuing, I'll open up something like Claude, and I'll start the investigation here. I'm asking Claude to understand what's happening with these cart service alerts that we're seeing. The first thing it'll do is bring in that skill that explains to the agent how to use the Observe CLI. And then it'll go ahead and start resolving the entities I'm talking about, like the cart, and it'll find that there's a service named cart service, and then it's going to find alerts related to that service. Here, we're leveraging the power of the knowledge graph and the APIs that we expose from Observe to enrich Claude's context. And here it's summarizing the alerts that we saw earlier. There are some cart service alerts and some information about them. It's asking if I want to dig in a little bit more, and I'm going to ask it to do so. Our agent's going to then bring in our next skill, the alert investigation skill, which gives Claude a bit of a roadmap on how to investigate these types of alerts. First, by leveraging the knowledge graph to find related services or other correlation tags, and then by finding data sets and metrics which it can use to aid its triaging session. Here it's looking at related alerts. And now it's begun looking at data sets and metrics and writing Opal in order to get insights from your data that's within Observe. And that's how we've brought the observability context into the IDE to make this loop of fixing production issues even faster.
Thank you, Cole. Great demo. Great to see the power of the observability data and the power of Observe right accessible from within the user's development environment. Now, off to our second major announcement, which is about Iceberg. Now, as Jeremy said, we've made a big bet on open standards since day one. First, it was OpenTelemetry. Second is Apache Iceberg. As part of Snowflake, we're now doubling down on our Iceberg investment to give you low-cost, reliable, high-speed open access to all of your observability data. Iceberg support also means that various teams across the organization can query and combine telemetry data together with business data without needing to extract or replicate data, thereby creating much-dreaded data silos. All of this while your developers and your SREs can continue using Observe, either through the UI or in a headless way, on top of data stored in Iceberg. And with this, I'm going to hand it over to Jawan, who's going to demo Observe running on top of Iceberg data.
Hello, My name is Jiayuan. I'm going to talk about our Iceberg support. Let me show you how it works. First, I'll create a data lake. It is a dedicated integration pointing at a storage location in my own S3 bucket. In the creation page, Observe gives me the ready-to-paste permission policies that I can bring over to the AWS console to configure S3 and IAM permissions. Once set up, Observe validates that it can do both read and write into my bucket location. That's it. My data lake is up and ready for data. Here in this account, I already have a few of them configured. Next, I'll head over to the source dataset page. All datasets listed here are receiving data from a real-time ingestion pipeline up to petabyte scale. To create a new one, I choose Open Telemetry Logs type and select one of my data lakes from the dropdown. Though you still have the option to use the default Observe Managed Storage. Once the dataset is created, I can mint a new ingest token and use the configuration details below to point my data collector at it. As my source datasets are being ingested, the underlying data files are written into my S3 bucket as Iceberg format in real time. On the read side, Iceberg-based datasets are fully compatible with the rest of the platform. Log analytics, dashboards, monitors, all of our established products work exactly the same as before. Here is one of the Iceberg OTel logs dataset open in the Log Explorer. I can parse logs, extract field, apply filters, and run all other operations with the same performance as before. For example, here I'm charting the data flow volume from different sources. Lastly, to deliver true openness and interoperability on top of Iceberg, we leverage Snowflake's Horizon catalog to give third-party engines access to all your observability data. Any clients that follows the Iceberg REST specification can connect to the catalog and query the Iceberg data underneath your dataset. There's only a single copy of your data that you can query from anywhere, even outside Observe. No data movement needed. Here is a Python notebook that I created to access the same data through PySpark. I can first import and configure the variables. I build the Spark session. And once the Spark session is established, I can run queries like switching different namespaces and list all the tables, Iceberg table in it. I can inspect the table metadata, and this is the table that we just created. And lastly, I can run a query that's specialized to my use case against the same table. This is just to give you an idea of how teams like data scientists, product, finance, compliance, and security can all get value from different perspectives with the same data.
Thank you, Jawan. This is great. That was a great demo. It's great to see Observe running on top of data stored in Iceberg on top of a user's S3. John, over to you.
Gabriel, thanks. I'd like to ask you one more question. Can you give us a little bit of a picture into the future of Observe, how we're going, a little bit about our roadmap?
Thank you, John. Great question. So our North Star is how can we help our users lower their MTTR? Now, as Jeremy said, the way our customers actually achieve that in the time of AI is dramatically changing. What's happening today has nothing to do with what's happening like 6 months ago. The nice thing is that Observe is actually leading from the front in this time of change. Now, with this in mind, our investments fall in the following kind of like categories. First, we're giving more power to AI agents. We invest in how we plug into agentic AI workflows, how we help our customers observe their AI workflows through LLM observability, and of course, how we use AI internally for development. Second, it's all about being open. We want to give our customers the best, open, reliable, high-speed platform for observability workflows. And third, we want to do all of the above while providing the best unit economics at scale for our customers.
Thanks very much. I'm looking
Thank you.
forward to it. With that, I think we'll go on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. Today, we were able to introduce Observe by Snowflake, tell you a little bit about it, our background, how we joined Snowflake and what we're doing here, how we're helping customers with observability at scale. And now we'll go on to the live Q&A portion. All right. Hey, little technical difficulty there on my part. Hey, Jeremy, thanks. Unfortunately, Gabriel could not make it today. I mean, he had to leave after our interview, but got you here, and so it's you and me. We've had some great discussion while we were talking. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions, Jeremy.
Fire away.
All right, first one, the first one actually is a product question. So we'll see how you do as the CEO. So I mean, it's an easy one though. So the architecture of Observe. Observe was built on Snowflake, but how is the architecture of Observe going to change now that we've joined Snowflake?
At the lowest level, I mean, we talked about Iceberg earlier, and that is not a Snowflake specific thing. I believe certainly the larger enterprises are going to make the commitment to Iceberg as the place that they want to store their telemetry. We're going to work with Iceberg-based data wherever it is. Of course, our query engine is Snowflake, but it should be able to access data pretty much anywhere. So I think on the back end, that's probably the biggest change going forward. Obviously, the benefit there for the customer is they can own their telemetry and sort of not be owned by the vendor potentially for the first time. I think secondly, and this is where Cole was coming from, I said this about a year ago and it freaked a lot of people out even internally, that in a couple of years' time, most of our users will maybe never see Observe. And I think folks are going to access Observe data from their natural habitat, from their development environment, from Cursor, from Claude Code. And so the CLI plus skills, I think architecturally, is going to replace, by and large, these very highly curated, complex user interfaces.
That's actually fascinating. I think related to that, let's talk about AI for a sec. There's a question, how is Observe's AI different than other observability vendors? There's a lot of AI SRE in the industry. And so I think, the context graph, and I don't know if people are using it from all sorts of workflows, different agents, as well as our own agents, what's different about Observe?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with observability, a lot of the AI-ness, so to speak, is not that different. I mean, you saw Cole's demo there. He's using Claude Code. That's the front end. I think where we aim to differentiate is that we want to provide building blocks so you can access sort of our code differentiation from anywhere. And really what we want to do is make sure people can access their data reliably, performantly, and that they get accurate answers, and that the cost of running those queries is the absolute industry best. So this has been our sort of differentiation since the beginning. We want to store and manage more data than anyone, more cost effectively, more performantly, if that's a word, and give accurate results. And I think the key here is going to be context. You don't want to be doing all of your inference, all your querying up in the LLM. That just burns tokens. We believe that if you consolidate your data, which, given the demo we showed with Iceberg earlier, is quite easy these days, we can extract the context for that. We can do a lot of the inferencing down in the database, and we can give the LLM just the context that it needs to give the accurate answer. So save those tokens, do the querying a little bit further down the stack, and your budget is going to benefit tremendously.
Yeah, that definitely ties into some of the comments you had earlier about AI and budgets, and it made the free ride maybe over. I've missed my window on some of my projects, but there's still time. I think we're still early in this. So there's a couple questions on open source. I know you just mentioned Iceberg. We're doubling down on Iceberg support. That's going to be very interesting. People can own their own data. But we also had a few questions on OTel. Both, are we open source? Like, is Observe open source? Do we use open source? What open source are we connected with? So, I mean, that's important, as well as if I don't use OTel, can I use Observe?
Yeah, it's funny. We've done this for so long. We sometimes, I mean, we don't even bother talking about it. From day one of the first principles of Observe was we will not create our own agents. There was huge, even 6, 7 years ago, there was huge customer
And this means observability agent, data collection agent,
as opposed to
AI
agents. Yeah, agents for collecting data. So things you would deploy to servers to collect logs and the like. And when we first started off, we would use a collection of open source agents, things like, Telegraph. That was actually quite challenging because obviously, depending on the customer configuration, those agents would work right away, or it would take some time to overcome the config issues. So we were delighted when OpenTelemetry really started to get traction. And if you look at the Observe agent today for collecting telemetry, it is essentially the OpenTelemetry, the upstream OpenTelemetry project. We have sort of a small wrapper around it to allow us to manage the agent, but it is essentially the open source OpenTelemetry project. And I think that in conjunction with the Apache Iceberg storage format really gives the customer an open way to not just ingest, but also to store data and manage it over time. So things are becoming very, very open.
Yeah, that has been a challenge in this space. The vendors' proprietary databases, proprietary data, once it goes in, where do you put it? I think that's shifting with Observe and this new generation of observability. We have a couple questions about telemetry data. How much data can Observe hold? How much data telemetry data do I need to have to consider Observe?
Yeah, we've tended to focus upmarket a little bit. I'll be bold and say if you've got gigabytes of data a day, there's probably about 50 products that you're probably going to be quite happy with. What we've seen is that when you start to get to multiple terabytes a day, once you get 2, 3, 5, 10, 50 terabytes a day, things change dramatically. That probably also means the complexity of your environment is much greater. And so we've tended to focus on folks who have multiple terabytes a day. Our largest account is headed up towards 0.5 petabyte a day. And certainly at those data volumes, you really need a back end that's going to be able to scale and not just scale to cope with the data volume, be able to query the data efficiently at scale. You want answers, but you also want to have answers that don't blow your budget. So yeah, we have no limit on how much data that you can send us, and certainly with Iceberg, that your only restriction was I guess how much you'd want to pay AWS for your S3 bucket. Whatever data volume you've got, we can handle it.
Nice. There is a question about ingest. I mean, at those volumes, ingestion of the data becomes an issue. You're looking at near real-time data. When something goes down, you want to know about it. Can you talk a little bit about what they're asking? What did Observe build in terms of ingest capabilities?
Yeah, from the beginning, actually, we built our own ingest pipeline for this reason, because with ingest, yes, you want low latency, so you want your data to be fresh in order to query it. But obviously, you don't want to blow the budget just ingesting data, because at the end of the day, you're ingesting it for a reason, because you want to be able to query it to troubleshoot your infrastructure or your application. So we built our own ingest pipeline. I'm sort of maybe spilling my guts on a bit more of a roadmap feature that you can expect to see in the next quarter or so. We are going to move that ingest pipeline to Snowpipe Streaming v2. We found that both the economics and the freshness of data with Snowpipe Streaming V2 are excellent. And so our customers can look forward to getting even lower cost to ingest data. In our world, that cost is pretty minimal. It's about 10 or 15% of the overall cost because we don't index data at ingest. You're going to see that go down, number one. And also, number two, freshness of data is going down below 5 seconds. So you will be able to do absolutely real-time debugging. So that's coming in the next quarter or two. But the ingest pipeline, as we sit today, freshness of data is probably 20 or 30 seconds. But I think we have one of the most efficient ingest pipelines, bar none.
Yeah. That's it's been interesting to see inside what all Observe has built over the years, the IP there, and the great lengths we go to get the data in there and keep it queryable. There are a few questions about the data and observability, Jeremy. 2 or 3 questions, and I think it's the common question about data observability versus other kinds of observability. Where do we sit? I think especially for Snowflake folks. This may be a little bit of it's not a new space in your company, but it may be a new space in the Snowflake world.
Yeah, the good news and bad news about observability is it's a hot topic, but it gets applied to a lot of things. And I think one of the main areas of confusion we see, certainly as we talk to sort of the data engineering and data ops folks, is they think that, Observe, we're a data observability vendor, meaning do we determine the status of data pipelines? Do we look inside those pipelines and determine quality of data or drift in quality of data? And the short answer to that is no, we are not a data observability vendor. We certainly can monitor pipelines. That's a pretty straightforward task. But the critical thing for data observability is determining data quality. And that's something that we do not do. That is very much on sort of the data engineering and data ops side of the house, and there's vendors like Monte Carlo and so on that do that kind of thing.
Related to that, 2 different people asked this question, which is actually maybe even a better question than folks realize. What parts of my company should know about Observe? What parts of my company might use Observe?
Yeah, I think we typically always talk to the head of SRE, the head of DevOps, the head of engineering. I mean, ultimately, the person responsible for fixing the software when there's a problem is the head of engineering. So I'd say the head of engineering is almost always involved in any sales cycle that we have. I would tell you also in larger organizations, certainly with the advent of Iceberg, we've talked more and more to the folks who run data architecture. If the enterprise is committed to an architecture with Iceberg at its foundation, I think perhaps for the first time, the observability teams, which often have been one or more silos, that there's an opportunity to play nice with the enterprise's data architecture or data strategy, which I said earlier is increasingly revolving around an Iceberg foundation. So we've talked to more probably data architecture people in the last year than we have in the previous 6 years. And I think that trend is probably going to continue.
What's been fascinating to me as I talk to our customers is, Observe is not charged per seat, right? We charge by the amount of data ingested. And some other vendors we're charging per seat or per activity. So all of a sudden, anybody who finds it useful can use Observe, and we can help train. And what I'm seeing is a lot of customer support, a lot of customer success, like account teams, all of a sudden are leveraging the data in Observe, most telemetry data, but also some other kind of business data. Can you talk a little bit about that? I found that kind of fascinating as well.
Yeah, you're going to see that more and more. I think because of the richness of functionality that observability tooling provides, the user interface over the years has gotten quite complex. That means, you tend to have, or have tended to have in the past, like specialized users, folks who are in the tool every day and they did a training class or several chapters of videos on YouTube. That's going away because if you can access the data from GPT or from Cursor or from Claude Code or from wherever, then you're only a sentence away from being able to use the product and asking a question. So I think that trend is going to continue. we certainly have companies that do sort of logistics tracking. Their customer support folks, they just really want to look up what's the status of a way bill. Well, it's never been easier now because you can do all of that in a natural language. And I think those kind of use cases are just going to improve over time. The nice thing from our perspective, we've always said since the day I've been at Observe almost since the day we started the company, we've always said observability was a data problem. And I think what's going on right now allows us to focus on the ingestion of the data, the structuring of the data, getting the data in the right shape in order for an agent to ask a question. And so I think bringing in business data to join that then with the telemetry data, you should be able to do some pretty wild things. I think it's always been the dream that you have an incident, you resolve the problem, and you want to know, well, hey, did that impact our business? Well, there's no reason why at this point you won't have the business data alongside your telemetry, and you can do that join. And that is something which in the past, as I said, has been sort of a dream, but has never really been a reality. And I think we're very close to that becoming reality.
I think that's great. I think last question. Maybe we zoom out a little bit. We've talked a lot about our approach, especially since we're now with Snowflake, about how we're dealing with data, our approach to data. But maybe zoom out to kind of the core value prop and how we're differentiated from other observability. We had a couple of questions about other observability vendors.
Mhm.
What do customers get when they work with Observe versus perhaps, I mean, almost everybody has some observability, whether it's open source or another vendor, because you need it to keep things going. What are we offering folks that other people aren't?
Yeah, I'll say it once, I'll say it again. It's all about the data. We're going to ingest more data than anyone. We're going to hold it in a trusted source. We're going to make it more reliable, more performant, more accurate answers, and we're going to do it at the lowest cost. And the nice thing is that Observe always had great unit economics, even before the acquisition by Snowflake. Now we own the data platform. So, yes, Observe, we no longer pay a Snowflake bill, so that makes the economics amazing. But actually, it's way more than that. We can better vertically integrate Observe. I mentioned earlier about Snowpipe streaming instead of our own ingest pipeline. There are many opportunities we have to take advantage of the unique things that Snowflake offers in order to improve those unit economics further. And I'll be bold and go out there and say that given the growth in telemetry, we've got to get those unit economics down to like 1 cent per gigabyte per month, right? It's not that long ago that some of the leaders in this market were charging $1, $2, $3, $4, $5 per gigabyte per month. That's got to get down to 1 cent. So when I say leading unit economics, that's the target.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing for sure, we're not going to have less data, less telemetry. That's for sure. Hey, Jeremy, I want to really thank you for being live here over this last hour. I want to thank our other speaker, Gabriel, who had to take off. And I also want to thank our audience. People, I appreciate your time, whether you're listening to this live. We had a great discussion here live, or whether you're listening to this as recording. Really appreciate you. If you have questions, you can, observe.inc, reach out to us. We're at snowflake.com/observe, and we'd love to connect. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.